Welcome back to Reality Asserts Itself on the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay, and we're continuing our discussion with Professor Aleksandr Buzgalin. Thanks for joining us again. So, Professor Buzgalin teaches political economy and is director of the Center for Modern Marxist Studies at the Moscow State University. All right, so to understand where we are, you really got to watch the earlier segments, because I ain't going to sum it up. And we're into a fascinating story, so if you haven't, just stop right now and go back and watch.
No, they can just understand that Soviet Union is collapsed.
Soviet Union is collapsed. All right.
We have new reality.
And the reason the Soviet Union collapsed is because you went on vacation and you weren't there to stop it. Now we got it.
Yeah.
Now we got it. All right. You come back from the vacation and there's kind of no Soviet Union. Yeltsin's in power. And you're saying, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Really, when officially Communist Party was forbidden and the Soviet Union disappeared, I must stress that in this period, people were tired from all this disorder. And there is question, why nobody came to protect Soviet Union? The question is important because 1 year, even less than 1 year before, we had referendum. And more than 70% said we want to have new Soviet Union. But we do want to have Soviet Union. New one, more democratic, not bureaucratic, but we do want. More than 2/3. And after that, nobody in the streets. Why? Because people lost trust to the leaders. And leaders led to the collapse. First. And second, we had a lot of this naive belief that market will bring prosperity tomorrow. And again, the reason was last years of Soviet Union, not even Gorbachev period, but before, last decades of the Soviet Union, we had growth of conformism, consumerism, and alienation. And this type of society will lead to the collapse of even quasi-socialist system inevitably. And this is fundamental reason. What we received, model theoretical, not even theoretical, but for ordinary people, logic was simple. We have in Soviet Union oil, gas, raw materials, everything. We have good industry, maybe not the best in the world, but very good. We have very big number of intellectuals, wonderful education. What we don't have market, which will create efficient economy. So now we will have market, we will have private initiative, and tomorrow we will have life better than in Sweden, because everybody wanted to have Sweden, not United States, with social polarization. What we received in reality? We received terrible crisis, 50% decline of production, 30% decline of average incomes, 30 because you know this old joke. What is average income? It's like in hospital average temperature. One guy is dead, his temperature is 30. Another is terribly sick, his temperature is 40, but in average 36.6, everything is perfect. But average income were 30% less, 35% less. But for majority, it was more than 50% less. So it was terrible situation. 2 million people were dead because of the poverty, hunger, absence of the apartments, and so on. It's a long story to explain.
Infant mortality rates went up, longevity went down.
It was a so-called Russian cross.
You said it in an earlier segment, shock without the therapy.
Shock without therapy, yes. So it was very
closing down of state enterprises.
Yeah, it was very radical privatization, liberalization, open economy.
And very much promoted, guided, and assisted directly by the United States.
Yes, but it was the only, or not the only, but the most efficient variant to expropriate state social property and to create private business and to create a new class of bourgeoisie during 1-2 years.
And this is the birth of the oligarchs.
Yeah. And it was very efficient, very smart idea, but for tiny minority who became very rich, and it was terrible catastrophe for majority. So when people say Gaidar, he was prime minister, and Yeltsin and all other made big mistake. No mistakes. They made great game for them. And the price doesn't matter for them. You know, there is such expression, to put airplane in the point of no return. It will be enough fuel to come back to the airport of the beginning. So the key idea for them was to put our country to the point of no return to Soviet Union, no return to the quasi-socialist, but still more or less socialist system. And they did it very quickly, very efficient transformation. A lot of people ask me, as professional, as political specialist in political economy, why transformation from bureaucratic planning to market, which is more or less efficient in the United States, led to the crisis? So I will give very simple, maybe too simplistic explanation, but we have interview, not lecture. There is parallel. Market is transportation in the city with private cars, and plan is like a subway. So if you want to move from subway transportation to private car transportation, it's not enough to put bomb in the subway. It's necessary to have roads. It's necessary to have cars. It's necessary to have drivers and polite drivers. It's necessary to have, I don't know, regulation in every crossroad. So it's necessary to build infrastructure, institutions, to have mentality and so on. And what was done in 1991, 1992? Explosive in the metro, explosive in the subway, nothing else. Planned system was completely destroyed by decree of president. One signature, no plan, no regulation of prices, no regulation of exchange, nothing. Free economy. What we received? Huge enterprise, 100,000 workers. We had shadow business people. They had maybe $1 to $10 million. Can they be owners of the enterprise with 100,000 workers? Can they pay them wage? Can they pay for the electricity, for the heat? No. What they made? They made, I don't know, from the enterprise a place where vodka was sailing, yeah, or something like that. So this is explanation why we received this crisis. And it was until growth of the struggle from below.
Just so people get what's going on during this period, if I understand it correctly, you have these massive wealth of the Soviet Union, or Russia at that point, including state enterprises and natural resources and oil and mines and all of this, and it all starts getting privatized, sold off for a song. And people at the higher levels of the state and such all start to cash in and own this stuff with paying very little to acquire these public assets. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct, yes. And we had very rapid, very brutal period of primitive accumulation of capital.
I think you called it in an earlier interview Jurassic Park capitalism.
Yes, it's true. It's an image. So it was like dinosaurs fighting between each other. Yeah, it's monsters. Huge, no, first of all, it was not huge corporations, but very quickly it was all concentration of capital in the hands of a few.
Were the Americans a little disappointed that it was mostly Russian oligarchs grabbing all this and the Americans themselves couldn't directly grab more of it?
It's partly truth. Partly because foreigners received a lot of positive, for them, of course, and negative for us results because of the free exchange rate of dollar. And for $1 in Russia, you could live 1-2 days without any restrictions for your consumption. It was a terrible situation. And very low prices for the oil and gas, so West received a lot. But West didn't have time to receive control over all natural resources. And mainly because Western, not because Yeltsin or Gaidar or anybody else created barriers, but mainly because they were afraid that it is so terrible disorder that they will not keep control over this oil and gas if they come. It was necessary to spend billions of dollars without any guarantees. And everybody was afraid that tomorrow will be again restoration of Soviet Union. Why? Because from 1992, we had enormous demonstrations and protest actions. It's not very well-known story, but in the center of Moscow, we had rallies for 200,000-300,000 people.
Demanding what?
Demanding stop privatization, demanding come back to Soviet system.
Were you there?
I was among the, it was two wings. One, and the most popular, by the way, was neo-Stalinist wing. We must come back to the strong Soviet power without any democracy and so on. Let's forget about these games.
And this is because of this is a way out of the chaos.
Yeah, because people so logic was very simple. Democracy led to the chaos, poverty, and so on. Even until now, the word democracy means power of Democrats in Russia. This is Russian translation of word democracy. And Democrats are those who are stealing everything in their pockets. This is strange interpretation of democracy, but this is the reality. So, and it was democratic left internationalist wing. And we had Congress of Left Democratic Forces coordinating council of this Congress. And I was among the, maybe not leaders, but important people who were working in this direction. And it's interesting that Parliament of Russian Federation, where we had left wing, relatively big left wing, started to prepare alternative to this policy. And we were among those who were experts. And the program was not radical socialism, socialist revolution, but more or less Chinese model. To stop brutal privatization, to keep socialist state sector, to restrict market, to have control over the prices, to support social justice, and so on. So more or less left social democratic program with a little bit statist form, yeah, little bit bureaucratic form. And we had big meetings, conferences, 1,000 people, delegates from different organizations, groups. And it was prepared. And in Parliament, we had nearly majority of support to this alternative. Not my program, but common program of this movement.
So 92, 93.
92, 93.
300,000 yeah. people in the streets.
Yeah.
But what about the broad section of the population? Are they sympathetic with this?
Absolute majority were sympathetic to these ideas. But not decisive to fight to go for revolution, let's say. Yeah.
And where is the army? And the army has had, you would think, such ideological training and all of this.
Army had terrible collapse. Because first of all, during 5 years of Gorbachev power, it was terrible discreditation of army. Army is a source for disorder, for dictatorship, for killing, and so on. And in 92, in army was poverty. Soldiers and officers were hungry, simply. It was no money for them.
So it's falling apart.
Yeah, so they were in terrible crisis. And summer 93, it was prepared a program, alternative program to privatization and so on, to continuation of this shock therapy, shock without therapy policy. And in early September, Yeltsin said parliament must be destroyed, dissolved. No more parliament. Close, go out. And in that period, deputies divided, and majority stayed in the parliament. Parliament was blockaded by police. In September, October, it was occupation. Parliament was occupied by deputies. Police blockaded parliament, and it was permanent demonstrations and attempts to destroy this blockade. The problem was that in parliament we had mixture of very authoritarian leaders who became strong leaders because they were decisive. Democrats, real Democrats, center, like Democratic Party of the United States, but who wanted to have not dictatorship of Yeltsin and not disorder. Social Democrats, quasi-communists, so mixture of everybody. And no real leadership and not very good organization. And a lot of very different people around, Russian nationalists, communists, social democrats who were protesting. Again, 100,000 people, clash with police, a lot of people were beaten, and so on. And finally, October 3rd, 2nd, we destroyed this blockade. It was huge demonstration, and it was direct clash with police, and I partly participated in this. Some policemen were killed, a lot of people were killed.
Blockade of parliament.
Yeah, but parliament was disblockaded. And after that, it was maybe provocation, maybe stupidity, but a group of people decided to attack TV station, and they made it in very brutal form. and without success, because in that period Yeltsin brought some special forces, and hundreds of people were killed before TV, and then it was a blockade again of parliament, and then tanks started to shoot to the parliament, and it was a very cynical and dirty situation when tanks were standing, shooting to parliament, and CNN was making an open-air report like TV, like a football match. Oh, look, now there is a fire in this window. Look, now these people are killed. Yeah. After that, we made book. By the way, after that, it was censorship. And
Yeltsin is fighting to consolidate this new oligarchy.
Yeah. And
amidst the chaos.
Yeah, 1 minute, we will come back, but it's important. After this victory of Yeltsin, we had the interesting newspaper, Independent Gazette, Независимая газета. And next day, it was heroic, by the way, decision of chief editor Tretyakov. We are good friends with him. He published newspaper with empty first front page. Yeah, it was nothing in front page, a symbol of censorship. And I'm proud that with our friends, we organized in small museum in the center of Moscow, first press conference about all these events. It was 90 cameras, but mainly Westerners. And it was no report, by the way, in Western media, because we said truth about this.
Which was?
It was that Yeltsin really made anti-constitutional coup. And
applauded by the West.
Yeah, and people were killed. A lot of people were killed for nothing. Not for nothing. They were protecting. I can say social democratic model of transformation, bourgeois transformation, but social democratic model of transformation.
When I hear descriptions of Yeltsin as a personality, it almost sounds Trump-like.
Yes, similar. Right-wing, decisive, I don't know, maybe the only difference, I don't know if Trump is a drinker or not, but Yeltsin was. So this is not very important difference. So we made this first press conference with friends, created a network for democracy and human rights. And it was not, of course, the key factor, but it was one of the factors which led to the elections, but not to the dictatorship. So it was big opposition to dictatorship. And finally, we received presidential model of democracy, quasi-democracy, but still not dictatorship. To go faster, in '96, we had new presidential elections in spring. In January, Zyuganov, leader of Communist Party, re-established Communist Party, had up to 50% according to opinion polls, and Yeltsin had less than 10. But then money of International Monetary Fund, propaganda, and very not brave, unbrave behavior of leaders of Communist Party led to the 50-50 result when it was elections. And Zyuganov said, no, I lost. I don't pretend to be president. So it was the beginning of collapse, not collapse, but decline of popularity of Communist Party.
And at that time, they're advocating a program essentially like a European social democracy or something.
Yeah, Communist Party was a little bit nationalist, but in economic and social sphere, like left social democrats, nothing radical.
And so who becomes president?
In '96, Yeltsin again. And then we moved to the Putin's presidency in a new epoch in 21st century. But this is another story.
Okay, the next segment, we'll talk about a whole new phase and the rise of Putin and what he represents on Reality Asserts Itself with Professor Buzgalin on the Real News Network.